there, my name's Emily, but you can call me Em if you like. I've never done any ASMR videos, but I've developed a love of them over the last couple of years, and as I like to sing, I thought it might be another good way to use my voice, so I thought I would try a wee lo-fi ASMR experiment with my Scottish accent, because I know it's an accent that a lot of people find quite soothing and relaxing. So I figured maybe the combination of the Scottish accent, the ASMR, the reading, storytelling might be enjoyable for some people. And I thought, what better to read first than a piece of Scottish literature. So I've chosen the first chapter of the first novel by Tobias Smollett, who actually came from very near where I come from in the west of Scotland. He was born in the 1700s, and his first novel, which I'm going to read from, was published in 1948. No, 1748, I believe. And its title is The Adventures of Roderick Random. So, sit back, relax if you can, and I hope you enjoy this wee experiment. As I say, I've never tried to do any ASMR videos, bedtime stories, that kind of thing, but I thought it might be fun. So you let me know what you think of the ASMR and of the story. I've never read this book myself, so we'll see how it goes. The Adventures of Roderick Random, Chapter 1. Of my birth and parentage. I was born in the northern part of this United Kingdom, in the house of my grandfather, a gentleman of considerable fortune and influence, who had, on many occasions, signalised himself in behalf of his country, and was remarkable for his abilities in the law, which he exercised with great success in the station of a judge, particularly against beggars, for whom he had a singular aversion. My father, his youngest son, falling in love with a poor relation who lived with the old gentleman in quality of a housekeeper, espoused her privately, and I was the first fruit of that marriage. During her pregnancy, a dream discomposed my mother so much that her husband, tired with her importunity, at last consulted a Highland seer, whose favourable interpretation he would have secured beforehand by a bribe, but found him incorruptible. She dreamed she was delivered of a tennis ball, which the devil, who, to her great surprise, acted the part of a midwife, struck her so forcibly with a racket that it disappeared in an instant, and she was for some time inconsolable for the loss of her offspring, when, all of a sudden, she beheld it return with equal violence, and enter the earth beneath her feet, whence immediately sprang up a goodly tree covered with blossoms, the scent of which operated so strongly on her nerves that she awoke. The attentive sage, after some deliberation, assured my parents that their firstborn would be a great traveller, that he would undergo many dangers and difficulties, and at last return to his native land, where he would flourish in happiness and reputation. How truly this was foretold will appear in the sequel. It was not long before some officious person informed my grandfather of certain familiarities that passed between his son and his housekeeper, which alarmed him so much that, a few days after, he told my father it was high time for him to think of settling, and that he had provided a match for him, to which he could in justice have no objections. My father, finding it would be impossible to conceal his situation much longer, frankly owned what he had done, and excused himself for not having asked the consent of his father, by saying he knew that it would have been to no purpose, and that, had his inclination been known, my grandfather might have taken such measures as would have effectually put the gratification of it out of his power. He added that no exceptions could be taken to his wife's virtue, birth, beauty, and good sense, and as for fortune, it was beneath his care. The old gentleman, who kept all his passions except one in excellent order, heard him to an end with great temper, and then calmly asked how he proposed to maintain himself and spouse. He replied, he could be in no danger of wanting while his father's tenderness remained, which he and his wife should always cultivate with the utmost veneration, and he was persuaded his allowance would be suitable to the dignity and circumstances of his family, and to the provision already made for his brothers and sisters, who were happily settled under his protection. Your brothers and sisters, said my grandfather, did not think it beneath them to consult me in an affair of such importance as matrimony. Neither, I suppose, would you have omitted that piece of duty, had you not some secret fund in reserve to the comforts of which I leave you, with a desire that you will this night seek out another habitation for yourself and wife, whither in a short time I will send you an account of the expense I have been at in your education, with a view of being reimbursed. Sir, you have made the grand tour. You are a polite gentleman, a very pretty gentleman, and I wish you a great deal of joy, and am your very humble servant. So saying, he left my father in a situation easily imagined. However, he did not long hesitate, for, being perfectly well acquainted with his father's disposition, he did not doubt that he was glad of this pretence to get rid of him, and his resolves being as invariable as the laws of the Medes and Persians, he knew it would be to no purpose to attempt him by prayers and entreaties, so without any further application, he betook himself, with his disconsolate bedfellow, to a farmhouse, where an old servant of his mother dwelt. There they remained some time in a situation but ill adapted to the elegance of their desires and tenderness of their love, which, nevertheless, my father chose to endure, rather than supplicate an unnatural and inflexible parent, but my mother, foreseeing the inconveniences to which she must have been exposed, had she been delivered in this place, and her pregnancy was very far advanced, without communicating her design to her husband, went in disguise to the house of my grandfather, hoping that her tears and condition would move him to compassion and reconcile him to an event which was now irrecoverably past. She found means to deceive the servants and get introduced as an unfortunate lady, who wanted to complain of some matrimonial grievances, it being my grandfather's particular province to decide in all cases of scandal. She was accordingly admitted into his presence, where, discovering herself, she fell at his feet, and in the most affecting manner implored his forgiveness, at the same time representing the danger that threatened not only her life, but that of his own grandchild, which was about to see the light. He told her he was sorry that the indiscretion of her and his son had compelled him to make a vow, which put it out of his power to give them any assistance, that he had already imparted his thoughts on that subject to her husband, and was surprised that they should disturb his peace with any further importunity. This said, he retired. The violence of my mother's affliction had such an effect on her constitution that she was immediately seized with the pains of childbed, and had not an old maidservant, to whom she was very dear, afforded her pity and assistance at the hazard of incurring my grandfather's displeasure, she and the innocent fruit of her womb must have fallen miserable victims to his rigour and inhumanity. By the friendship of this poor woman, she was carried up to a garret and immediately delivered of a man-child, the story of whose unfortunate birth he himself now relates. My father, being informed of what had happened, flew to the embraces of his darling spouse, and while he loaded his offspring with paternal embraces, could not forbear shedding a flood of tears on beholding the dear partner of his heart, for whose ease he would have sacrificed the treasures of the East, stretched upon a flock bed in a miserable apartment, unable to protect her from the inclemencies of the weather. It is not to be supposed that the old gentleman was ignorant of what passed, though he affected to know nothing of the matter, and pretended to be very much surprised when one of his grandchildren, by his eldest son deceased, who lived with him as his heir apparent, acquainted him with the affair. He determined therefore to observe no medium, but immediately, on the 3rd day after her delivery, sent her a peremptory order to be gone, and turned off the servant who had preserved her life. This behaviour so exasperated my father that he had recourse to the most dreadful imprecations, and on his bare knees implored that heaven would renounce him if ever he should forget or forgive the barbarity of his sire. The injuries which this unhappy mother received from her removal in such circumstances, and the want of necessaries where she lodged, together with her grief and anxiety of mind, soon threw her into a languishing disorder, which put an end to her life. My father, who loved her tenderly, was so affected with her death that he remained 6 weeks deprived of his senses, during which time the people where he lodged carried the infant to the old man, who relented so far, on hearing the melancholy story of his daughter-in-law's death and the deplorable condition of his son, as to send the child to nurse, and he ordered my father to be carried home to his house, where he soon recovered the use of his reason. Whether this hard-hearted judge felt any remorse for his cruel treatment of his son and daughter, or, which is more probable, was afraid his character would suffer in the neighbourhood, he professed great sorrow for his conduct to my father, whose delirium was succeeded by a profound melancholy and reserve. At length he disappeared, and, notwithstanding all imaginable inquiry, could not be heard of, a circumstance which confirmed most people in the opinion of his having made away with himself in a fit of despair. How I understood the particulars of my birth will appear in the course of these memoirs.